Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations. Thank you for joining us on Esoteric Radio. Today is Sunday, May 8th, 2011, and you're on the air with Sevan and myself, Kayo Moon. We are all present today to get the full picture on one of the most influential beings on this galaxy. Today, Sevan will be presenting to us his knowledge on these species. Welcome to the Reptilian Disclosure Project. Before we get started, for anyone who has a question during the show, you can contact us by dialing 347-996-5688. Please press 1 to raise your hand to get you on the switchboard and on the air. You can also post your questions on Blog Talk Radio's chat box and, of course, the Resistance chat box if you're on the Resistance website. If you're new to the Resistance, you will get more information by checking out the Resistance website at www.resistance2010.com. There you will find a free copy of Sevan's book, The Code to the Matrix. You can also get a visual and audio version of The Code to the Matrix on YouTube. Please check it out to be in the know. And now here's Sevan to launch us out to the Reptilian Disclosure Project. Good day, Sevan.
Good day, Moon, and thank you for the introduction. And we're actually in the studio. I'm here with Mr. Spirit Matter, and it's just wonderful to be able to once again come together here on Sunday, May the 8th, to give everyone that is present the knowledge that they're going to need to continue to go along the path as possible in light of that's taking place in it. I first wanted to let everyone know that just as with everything, we're always crossing into different regions, and we're always progressing here at the Resistance, covering and talking about things that are seldom talked about due to the phobias and the diplomacy that exists within our illusionary society. And today is the beginning of our launch of what I'm dubbing the Reptilian Disclosure Project. And the reason why it was termed as such is it wasn't termed the Alien Disclosure because there's already been one of those. It's been called the Reptilian Disclosure because that is also, of course, one of the most influential triggers that are coming about through the New Age movement and through these different spiritual movements is the involvement of the reptilians in our reality. But in actual reality, what we're going to be talking about is we're just going to be talking about entities, beings, aliens of all types, just the other citizens of these subtle planes that we will be traveling into, and some of us are traveling in already. That way we can become a lot more cohesive about what we're looking at. I will explain it like this. It's basically like those of the Western consciousness are coming out of a cave. All of the knowledge that I'm presenting is very well known in much more detail in different cultures around the world. Any surviving culture does not see it as a benefit to not instruct their citizens or denizens of knowledge about the spiritual plane, meaning that generally if you want your culture to survive, it needs to be very equipped in the spiritual plane also, because that's where you have to carry your ancestry, your lineage, etc. So understand that the reason why in this particular system they say Saturn is its governor is because Saturn is more or less carrying a sight, and that sight has been used to cut our umbilical cord, for better lack of words, in our connection to all there is in the womb and the matrix, etc. Notice that if you look at the word history, it does say his story, but if you look at the word mystery, it also says Mrs. or her story. But it says it's a mystery, meaning no one really knows about the matrix or the womb and what it really consists of according to, well, people do know, but of course they say in these words that no one should know, or it's a mystery, we don't know. So this actually leads us to the exact point where we are now, which is discovering that for ourselves, understanding what is exactly going on here in this particular dimension, and what is adjacent to us in the dimension below us and the dimension above us. And that was an important fact to bring up during our last recording, which was that the dimension above us, we call it the higher dimension, and the dimension above us is the dimension below us, and this puts us in a position of being somewhat sandwiched. Also, for those that are tuning in, there's an interactive post, or the beginning of an interactive post that's available on the Resistance, and that post is called The Real Reptilian and Alien Entity Disclosure. And in that, you'll find 3 documents pertaining to what we're going to be discussing today, the actual proof. In addition to that, you will find this post in particular enhanced in a new method that I'm going to be bringing out in order to help us with publication, but we're going to enhance this post to something incredible because I have a million ways that I can prove what I'm discussing in this post is correct. There's also to another point, which is the only reason why this post would be denied by an individual is through fear. And I wanted to deal with fear before we even began this conversation. Remember, today's show is only 45 minutes because it's introductory. But we have to understand that fear is indeed the mind controller. It is the control point for the species that we are because we were not raised to endure fear. We were immediately brought into fear in an earlier stage, and then all of our filters have been developed based on our fears. It's important to understand, as I talk about in this post, that what becomes really funny to me is that the child in you is now going to teach you. It's going to teach you how not to fear, one of the most incredible lessons in being taught by a child. Because the child in you, at a certain point, even if those that have been abused very early, even still at a certain point there was a fearlessness within you because you had not been yet exposed to the fire, for better lack of words. You had not ever come to know that it can burn you and to know that it hurts and to feel the pain and to cry. You were in a dimension where such things did not exist. And so it's very important for us to understand that when you tap into that reference point, that's going to be the only thing that, one of the only things that you need to fortify you in crossing foreign planes is for you to just be fearless and not give off that odor or that essence. Because just as they say that dogs can sense fear, what they're really saying is that the beings on the other realm, they can sense anything, especially fear. And in addition to that, like if you've noticed, also if you fear, that also means you're not where you're supposed to be. So there's always a question with any being that's trying to guard its territory is why are you in their territory? Because if you were familiar there, then you wouldn't be afraid of where you were. So that's why these senses they hold a higher level of knowledge that we're going to be looking into. But it's just like if you go into many other parts of the rural forest, you'll notice how quiet it is. And then if you sit really still, you'll notice you can hear small things moving about the brush and moving around. And then you can understand exactly how acute the animal senses are to hearing and sensing and smelling other things that are foreign. And so this is wholly what the spiritual plane is conducive of, is higher levels of interpreting what exactly is being experienced. These beings have more senses. When you go into the higher planes, you have more senses. So what I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk about first the fearlessness, because it is something that you set it in your mind as something to do, but in meditation only can you really activate these states. Not just in meditation, but also through circumstances. You can conquer your fears by either going through the situation again and not and braving it, or going through the meditation and resetting yourself through the fear and seeing how it played a catalyst in your life and how it ironed things out to remove it. And the reason why it's important to mention that is because at a certain point, anything that becomes foreign becomes the fear. And this is what literally happens as I talk about in this post, that basically one in fear does not venture out too far beyond their perceived protective boundary, meaning that using their mind, body, and soul, the mind, body, and soul has already determined how far it could really go and still be safe, according to the individual program of the mind, body, and the soul. And so this is what limits many people from going into these large astral journeys and going into these spiritual realms, etc., is because that's out of the protection boundary, because what you're going to see there, because that's existent beyond you, meaning that it is in existence and it does exist there, so just because you don't want to see it doesn't mean you're not going to see it. So if you go into these realms, there's going to be a world there and there's going to be beings there. So what happens is that these become the way that stop us from traveling into other worlds. Like, because there was many big arguments about whether the method used by Christianity, which is to keep a person from knowing anything about the spiritual world, basically. Christianity automatically defeats itself by saying that you shall not subscribe to any mediums or talk to any mediums or talk to, and it says this in the, but that's all the whole Bible is using medium and talking to the spirit called Jesus. So it's important to understand exactly what's actually taking place on the spiritual game, because that spiritual game has been playing out so long it's seemed natural now. meaning that the natural laws of Christianity, the natural laws of Islam, and these type of religions that are still, they don't teach anything really on the path of Dharma and Karma to ascend one's soul. They just don't. Then that means that they roll under one category of the religions of the demigods. And it's very interesting when we get to this point, because then we actually see more of a world, meaning that then this spiritual plane that we're talking about that these demigods exist on ends up starting to be mapped out. And it maps out basically as such that the individuals that leave this planet that are defunct spiritually, or they have served. Now, let me explain this to you. When you're defunct spiritually, it's because you're serving something negative. Natural process of things, just like a tree, is to grow upward. So the only thing that can actually pull a person down, whether it's in con or whatever the case is another negative energy. And so what happens is that when a person spends their life basically carrying on the rituals and the rites of a negative energy, whether it's going to a bar, which means Saturn, whether it's doing different things that basically are occultating you, in the end of your life, you now are under the control of that spirit. Because even during life you were under control, but you had some say-so. The next life, if one hasn't made the right choices, they're actually under the control of the actual larger being. So this is how it works out, is that when a sorcerer, which is still a physical person at certain extents, is in this world and then agrees to work with another being like, let's say, Saturn, then what they have going on is that the person who's already left the world is under control by Saturn. Saturn then allows the person that left the world to help the person that's still in the world to still serve Saturn. So that is very important for people to understand. That is exactly the transfer between a demigod, a spirit, or a daemon, and a human. The spirit and daemon is generally a being from a world, this world, any sentient forms. Remember, when they talk in Buddhism, of Dharma Buddhism, they talk about instructing all sentient life. They're not limiting it to just a human form. It's anything that has sentience. And so we have to understand that what the spiritual planes that are below are full of is a controller that everyone is working for, a few controllers that everyone is working for in those planes. And the reason why they've ended up there is because they've been serving that controller through life. So this is actually how religion plays a part in where one ends up when they leave this earth. They will still go under the charge of this God that they were worshiping. If they don't understand and know anything about the God, that obviously shows their status with the God. Because many of the individuals who know who Zeus is and Zeus or Deus Pater or Daius, or who knows who Saturn or Sa and Sat, who knows who these beings are, then they're at another advantage of how they can conduct their agreements and pacts with these beings. Someone who doesn't know anything at all is at an extreme disadvantage and not even being given respect within that kingdom. So for those that even gravitate towards evil, you can drop them that memo, because it seems like they don't know any more about what's going on than the next person. And so this is the part of things that start to make things alive. That's what we have to understand, is that once going into these planes, your world starts to become really active with meaning. Every single thing that you're experiencing, from the streets you're going down to the people that you're with, start to have meaning. That's when you're becoming more awake. And dealing with the spiritual planes is what accompanies that. I've included a few different charts that were taken from the site, the Spiritual Research Foundation, which has done a lot of work on just mapping out how the planes are, how the chakras are, and different spirits that they've encountered on their further investigation of dealing with spirits. The site, I will say, because some people will link to it through some of these publications, the site, I will say for the record, still remains neutral on its status on the gods, and I know this is because them not even wanting to get into the whole thing, because we've had to spend at least 2 or 3 years, or 2 years, 3 years now, explaining to people what the gods are really about. And it's only till right now, well, through etymology, and it's only until right now that people are to see that that is in fact the truth. And it's like a veil coming off our eyes. And so moving right into this, like we were talking about these agreements between these higher demigods, then the spirits, that are then told, you go serve this human that's working for me because he's going to be able or she's going to be able to bring more people to me because they're still in the physical world. So you actually see Earth as the decision-making position. That's why choice exists here. It's literally where, if you look at the names of the negative energies, they have names such as hinderers, liars, accusers, slanderers, and these names all hint at things that get you upset or make you agitated, etc. And so we can now map out 100% that the largest part of our agitation from this reality is coming from these spirits and people that are working for demigods. And if a person doesn't want to just conclude it there, it becomes very difficult not to, because we have a large group of our population that's pushing their energy, their intelligence, and everything they have into that, and not even researching it. Or some have researched it and just agreed to go ahead and go with it. Never understanding that Earth itself is just a test, like it's still going to continue the way it is, but how you act in it is going to make the biggest difference out of all things. So we now come to an interesting point where I had been pulling some documents for a while ago in regards to some situations taking place in Africa with a couple of the magicians there and them turning to Christians. And them thinking they escaped the horrors of the current religions that they were under, started to testify all of the things that were going on in their previous religions, which generally basically boiled down to Saturnalia. But the fact of the matter was, it was way deeper than how the United States is introducing Saturnalia to everyone, because still understanding in India and in places like that where Sat and those terms are being used, they're already very aware of the relationship between the father of this planet and what it's really doing. And some have chosen to worship it, some have chosen to war against it, and this has been called fighting the sun, because they knew, in all the indigenous texts you'll see, that the sun in our sky was what we're calling now the all-seeing eye. It was the eye that pierces, as with its photon beams, it pierces all things, it sees all things. And one draws substance from it. It's almost like it plays fodder, F-O-D-D-E-R, which means food, or it plays fodder to all the beings that exist in the garden underneath it. But people have to understand that, again, a garden is for you to grow plants, and the ultimate outcome of a plant is it should be eaten, or produced, and something should be pulled from it, whether it's nectar or whatever. So still understand the relationship. And so this started to tap us into, as the post begins to talk about, is us being out of the influence of the sun. And remember, I'm compressing a lot of this knowledge that I'm going to be expanding on this post. But there's a couple of things that are trigger words that I'm mentioning here that will allow people to understand things that they've already really discovered, but to understand that it's happening now. That what was literally taking place in the ancient documents is they were saying that the Earth would come under the influence of another planet for 3 days, and that would be the cataclysm or the catalyst or whatever words you want to use that are all the same, to cause the big transformation within our species. And it was known that this was also an eclipse, that there would be a planet that moved into the celestial body, that moved into our celestial field and blocked our sun for 3 days, instead of the common 15 minutes or 10 minutes or even seconds sometimes that eclipses generally last, that this planet is actually going to stop. In addition to that, this would cause the fractal version of our body not having its lamp, for better lack of words, not having its light as we perceive light. And this gets into very deep things, and that's why it's going to be something very fancy for me to discuss, because it is one of those things that's going to be a positive thing for some individuals and a negative thing for other individuals. It's the judgment. It determines all things. It determines whether you're ready to exist without this fodder, this food, this substance that you're calling life in Earth, because you're eating these animals and the sun has to come out for you, and you have all these dependencies. And then the dark night of the soul, as they call it in the esoteric terms, is to come upon the whole race, the whole planet. When generally, if you're inspired to be an adept, you could cause the dark night of the soul upon yourself by certain alchemical procedures. This is the point where you are tested to see if you can protect yourself without the sun. Now, this is interesting because if you want to look into the simple value of this, if the sun plays this kind of role, let's say on the cement, on a wet cement, if the sun doesn't appear on the wet cement, the cement continues to be wet, like remember our planet is a wet water planet, then there will be mold that begins to grow. If no sun shines on that mold at all, the mold will overgrow the cement and everything, and then the mold just will keep growing up and it'll smother out everything. The sun is what keeps the mold or those basic life forms, those lower dimensional forms, from growing into this one. The lower planes are only calculated because of their absence of light from our sun, like how far are they away from our sun. So understanding Pluto and those kind of planets is to understand the real, hell is cold, it's not hot. It's like a frigid cold that sets into it feeling like it was the hottest hot. And so what literally happens here is that we begin, and again, I'm giving a lot of the general ideas here because for those that are thinkers, and that's many of the people that are on this line, it just expands into so many things. It can make your brain go real quantum when you understand that. When you learn to live without light, this light we're calling the sun, because you can protect yourself from the mold, then you don't have to be under the influence of the molds and the celestial bodies and those that protect one from things that they should be protecting themselves from. That is the whole goal of the spiritual transformation, is to completely become dependent from something else. So you stop becoming a vampire so things can stop vampiring you by universal law. So this is what led into the concept of breatharian and things of that nature, where a person could be completely self-sufficient on something that there's infinite abundance of, not something that is limited in one way or another. Because limitation starts to cause favoritism, and that's exactly what began to happen with the sun and its power, is the sun became only interested in having people that were going to push a lot of energy into it. Because outside nature is the smaller bodies push energy into them, just like we talked about the actors and stars being given certain names so that we, as believers in them or in liking them, push energy into them, and then because they're celestial bodies and those names correspond to celestial bodies, those celestial bodies get those units of energy and get larger. So as you can see, spirituality itself was never something very simple because we're not very simple beings. I think that was like the first thing I ever said when I started getting on the radio. It's an adventure. It's very entertaining, but it's actually a climb up a hill. It's not downhill. An ascent is uphill, and so it's very, one has to understand the difference between the two. Like if you slide on the cardboard box and you go down a hill, it's very fun, and it's no energy, and you're just laughing, or what they call a fake, when I'm discovering now. But when you're walking up the hill, you're tired, which comes from the word Tyre, which means the actual home of Satan. And that starts to get to you. So the explanation of what we're dealing with here on this planet, how many levels of being able to explain a person? There was a level of knowledge that you could never deny. And that's why if you look on, I believe, one of these charts here, actually it is another chart, and I have to post it in here, but it talks about the higher states of consciousness accompany a level of knowledge that is just phenomenal to how you can show within everything the lessons that need to be learned here. And now we're getting a chance to do that. And so I'm going to check really quick and see. I think I'm about 25 minutes into the line right now, and we're going to be taking some calls within the last 15 or 10 minutes of this conversation. So I'm allowing Boone to tell me if there's somebody that has a question.
Okay,
and
yeah,
until that point.
Yeah, right. I was just going to say we have 19 minutes in the show, and there's no questions posted. Okay, great.
All right, so basically, I'll get more into this 3 days of this dark night of the soul. So basically, what is to occur is that once this eclipse takes place, the key was for the ancients is they knew what planet was going to eclipse the sun, because the only thing that happens when the sun is eclipsed is the actual larger celestial body is using the sun's energy to emit or hack and send energy, to hack its energy and to amplify its energy. So basically, if you stand in front, like they say, the Christ is the Eve angel for them. Jesus stands in between them and God. So in so many words, Jesus eclipses God and amplifies himself from God's power, and then chooses how much to give to people based on who worships him. So that is the basic structure of how the spiritual plane really works. And to free yourself from it, and to understand it, is to free yourself from it, because you realize how one can really get caught up in it and not even know and understand at all what they're actually involved in. People don't understand that they're pushing energy into other celestial bodies, and those celestial bodies are actually abusing anyone that's contrary to their energy. And it's just basically a whole free-for-all going on, and we're being made to war against each other, and it's distracted us for millions of years. That's what's been going on Earth. And so each time Earth comes around for another one of these successions, there is only devised by the higher beings and ancient beings, etc., another way to bring this knowledge that has already been in existence to mankind. And the only thing that's changed is the reality that we're being dropped into, meaning that this one in particular has malls, it has cars, it has things of that nature, but the same thing is going on that was going on when you were dropping in and there was only pyramids and everything around. It's still, you have to graduate your society to a higher level of consciousness, because we are connected, and that's our responsibility. But to understand the powers that be, it's like nothing up there is doing anything for free. That's just not how it works. It's on a universal law of a push and a pull. If they give you something, then they want something back. Until you understand how to manage your own energy, and that becomes a motivational drive and attainment for you. That's how it works. So basically, if the deities and the larger beings say, hey, we'll give you a planet, but you owe us this, you owe us your firstborn, you owe us energy, you owe us this, you owe us that. The only way you can get out from under something like that is first you work with these three paths that we talk about in this post. It talks about first, I talk about the lexicon, I talk about the body, and I talk about the herbs. And I put the herbs first because basically it was known in these higher paths, and I've been having an opportunity to read a lot of these documents, that you never approach spirituality and going into higher states of consciousness without a supreme knowledge on what herbs and what elements, like your Agar 35s, your chulins, your energy building elements, and different things, ayahuasca. There's many different herbs that have already been discovered to begin to purify and filter the mind, body, and soul, so that way you can start passing through your gates. And so without a knowledge of that at all, and Christianity becomes guilty of that, Islam becomes guilty of that, those religions become guilty of not even showing people at all the herbs that are necessary to take their body into the state in which they're perceiving, in the state in which they want to come. Because there's more than just thinking about you want to go somewhere. That's just the first part. The next thing is you have to figure out what you're going to travel in. You got to figure out a few more things. And so it's more than just thinking about something that allows something to come into manifestation. And so you also have the body. The body in itself, it's just left to sit around and do nothing, will actually regress into what we are calling the reptilian nature, which is really the preliminary version of ourselves. And it's interesting because if you notice, reptiles just lay around all day. They lay around like lizards. They just lay around in the hot sun, and that's all they do. And so if you think about that state of consciousness, then we already understand that, what's really happening is that if you don't train your body, it degrades into a reptile. Then it starts to take over everything. It starts to make you act bestial. It starts to make you be really into material and fight or flight. And then that's what's happening in your body. But if you tune it up to be like a bird, I don't think you would look at any of these people that are very tuned up and really in a high state of consciousness as simply reptiles. You would see them light as birds and very effective, very quick. So that's what we're talking about. And And so we have these areas, and the lexicon becomes important because there's a whole large group of people that says you never need to read anything. But if they look at even the people that they're studying from, that's all they really did is sit back and read, because it crosses time. When someone spent their whole life just studying one particular subject to deliver you one book, you can read that one book and cross their whole lifetime. I mean, it's like jumping through time when you get the proper knowledge and get the right ability to determine what you're listening, what you need to take from what you're hearing and what is true and what is not. But again, what really happens is that these languages that have been delivered to this planet, and that's why there was always an investigation by third party and by kings and queens of what ones left the planet, meaning let's go to Titicaca and see why they disappeared because we could just look at their language. Let's go to this place and see if we can find something written on the walls because we could just tell by their language how they did it. Because once you have the languages just need to be reverse engineered from there. It becomes the extraterrestrial communication device itself. And that's why the lexicon gives you more of a map to the immediate galaxies that have shared their information with you through their language. And so that's why there's this big disrespect from many different beings if you can't speak like they speak, because they know that you haven't taken the time to even understand how they talk to each other. So this is like very expensive. I'm very excited to be at this particular point because it also just kind of gets everyone to the point. It gets us exactly to what's holding us back and how to remove that from us. It gets us to also the clutch point of things to see if you're kind of what they call man or mouse, or whether you were really into it or whether you were just playing around and you need to hang out on Earth a little bit more longer for the protection or the overpriced protection, I will say. That's really what it's more like. It's more like overpriced protection. Because remember, we talked about this the last show, but you have to understand that if you're using a slave language and you're a slave, like if you have pride and all that stuff, I can understand it, but it's very easy to understand where exactly you are based on what you've been doing for the last couple of lifetimes. And so what happens with this type of position is generally something will attempt to free you from this if you will ally with them. And that's what really kind of becomes the next, now we're after the fact here on Earth. People have become slaves already. Now the after the fact is stepping into the position. And after the fact is that some of these gods are promising that they'll emancipate the humans from this world if those humans come into allegiance with them and fight and battle with them. We cannot say for sure whether those obligations have been met, but what we can say is that based on the state of the world that we're actually living in and seeing that some people have made these pacts and agreements already, it doesn't look like things are going very well. Not to mention that a person has the ability in their physical life to link up with people that are around them that are on a high level and to know them across lifetimes. Meaning when you meet someone here on Earth and you know what they're about and you went through the transformation with them, that's the people you walk into the spiritual plane with. That's the people that you go to the next level with. And that's become one of the biggest things that's being told to us here at the Resistance is that it is the point where we're building our group because now we're going to be coming out to everyone. We didn't come out before because it was of no interest for us to not have a complete grasp, meaning that the Resistance has become a complete doctrine for how to live in the world we're living in. It provides solutions for your diet, it provides solutions for your intelligence, and it provides solutions for your soul, frequencies, etc. And so we've covered several areas that actually allow us to be complete, wholeness. Now that we have the wholeness, which is the last portion of this, is how to deal with these spiritual beings, the darkies that are holding our loved ones, and everyone should be your loved one at this point back. You have this information from CV and from individuals like the Spiritual Research Foundation and myself to understand exactly what you're dealing with. You're going to need to accept it very fast. You're going to need to get in gear very fast and to get active and to understand what exactly you're dealing with. And remember, it's like climbing the hill, so don't be afraid at times when you're dealing with a little bit of stuff that's going to strengthen you. Just look at it just as that. And so, I know we're coming around the 10-minute mark. Is there any questions there, or can I just close this thing?
Yeah, and it's a question pertaining to getting more energy, I guess. Someone wanted to know, should we learn or can we learn how to align and invoke the elemental forces, and the forces like wind, water, earth, and fire?
Sure. I mean, really what's happening is that when it comes to energy is a very vast topic. It also becomes, like I'm talking about in this post, we haven't even had a chance to go through a trial of what it would be like without these energies. So it would be very difficult for us to judge what would be one state from another. So basically, if everyone's saying, yeah, but we can't exist without the sun, like I talk about in this post, the person says, but we can't exist without the moon. Well, you won't exist as you are now, but we don't really have too much data of what we would be like. Now, there's those who've done the dark room meditations, and there's those who've been in the center of the earth, and they say they've come back to give us a message that when you're completely out of the influence of all these celestial bodies, you're completely balanced. You're wide open. You don't have a chakra, basically. Like they say, basically, the chakra is the planet of influence. And it doesn't mean you should not work to open your chakra, because opening your chakra means you're opening the gate. You're going to deal with what's on the other side of the gate. And that's why many people at times have a personal change, that they have that change, and they have conflicts, and they have confrontation when they open the chakra. Or sometimes it's just an emotional confrontation with crying, and an extreme release of emotion and energy, because that gate has just now opened. And also remember that the goal was never to just kind of stay like you're going to stay in the crown chakra or whatever. The goal was either you have free reign through all your chakras, either you have free reign through this galaxy, or you need to leave the galaxy. Those are the only two kind of options for freemen, as they call it, or beings that weren't under any type of obligations, contracts, and things like that. It's like I can pass through your system freely, or I'm definitely not going to get trapped in your system. I don't want to be a part of your system on those type of agreement levels. But we have to understand also that as we see, when you look at the ancients, as far as that were living on this planet, what you still see is that regardless of whatever they were doing, they were still purporting and serving something else that had come to them. Like I said, the Vikings had their gods, and their gods that came to them from the sky. And the Africans and the Egyptians and everyone had their gods, and their gods came to them from the sky. And what they're saying is that, okay, there is this advanced level above us. And we've been trying to get in contact with them, and some of them have had our interest in mind. Some of them have had communion with us. There's multiple stories of what has taken place when one sends out their beacon. And that's what's also interesting, because you see in the theme of many of the movies now that they say that, Earth was trying to contact and sending out signals, and then someone finally answered that signal that we should never have sent a signal to. This is the hint of just telling people that when you open up dimensions or portals or gates, and if you don't know anything about that, you're allowing a back door from one dimension to another. Those are back doors. They're not front doors. The front doors are these physical gates, or not physical, but these gates that are guarded. The back door is someone's opened up a little gate for a time, and it's only a matter of time before someone figures out that gate is open, but it's still open. And it's known, like I talked about in this post, that the situation occurring on Earth is spiritually, through the music and through things that are coming out right now, never been done before. Portals are being opened up inside of people that the ones who close those portals out of protection, or the workers, as they call themselves, can't keep up. And so what we have is the planet going into a phase that's still already predicted. So it's almost like the predictions can only be slowed down. They can't really be prevented from happening. And in that slowing down period, you can actually prepare yourself and prepare things to endure that. And that's what the whole idea of an arc really was, is to build up your mind, body, and soul, in this case, you build up your mind, body, and soul because it will make something else. 3 still equals 4. So whatever composition of what you have in your body is going to birth something new. Your whole duty and purpose here is to make sure whatever is going to birth next is as equipped as possible to deal with the realm that it's going to be immersed in. And I believe 100% that the only way that we can be not scarred from the experience that we've had on Earth is to still take this information that we're now receiving, that's just such a high level of information, and allow it to catapult us out of spheres that exist like this. And then it doesn't become a bad thing. It becomes the map. It becomes the catalyst. It becomes every single thing that you needed to get you to the next level as still a young being. Many are proclaiming being ancient. That's all about how your existence and what you're doing. Like, people want to always claim, like, I'm very ancient, I'm very old, of old and deep, dark descent. But they can't philosophize and they don't have power and all of that. Those are the things that determine how ancient you are, because all those are theories as they call them, meaning they're actual luminites or energies of light and spirit that fill up the individual's vessel to allow them to be like that. And then when they turn away from that, then they're not like that anymore. And so it's your duty to stay on that frequency and get on the higher frequencies. And that's really how this whole thing. No, this has never been about, and this is the last thing I'll say because I know we're running out of time here. But what I'll say is that the Western world, like I started this conversation, has made us think that the spiritual world is a game to not our advantage. The church has said it was going to be to our advantage because we were never going to get caught up in this crazy spiritual stuff, so therefore we were never going to know about it and it was never going to affect us. That's almost like closing the closet on a huge amount of stuff that's going to eventually come burling out of the closet. That's what's happening. And so what we're doing now is we're rushing to spiritually equip people with the truth, but as I say here, this is the greatest mystery too scary to be told. 3 days of darkness of a transformation of a person's soul. If you're prepared, you'll go right through the gate of your own consciousness and you'll be completely emancipated for anything that's trying to control you. If you fail, you'll probably be plunged into a dimension of very dark things to the point where they may consume anyone's stuff there. That seems to be ultimately in the darker books that the elite keep publishing to their members. What they're talking about is a great day that they're actually able to roam on land or roam on this dimension for a short period of time, and that's all they need to consume majority of the things here. And so I'm sure Dr. Blair talks about this very briefly. There's a lot of deeper men that know a lot about this. And it's just about time for someone to say it, and whoever's going to take the credit for it as far as taking the bullet, meaning that not getting accused of being a fearmonger. But like I said, I produced the problem, bundled with the solution. People have to tap into their inner child through the meditation, get out of the crazy stuff that's making you immoral and adult. Basically, I'm an adult now. Making you that, and really get yourself together so you can deal with what's about to come, because it certainly will not delay, and that's guaranteed.
Thank you so much, Sevan. This is amazing information. And I just wanted to add, we have to all get to a level of fearlessness, and you're obviously really showing that. And it's about time that someone spoke up. And I just want to get everyone to, if you want to read more about the reptilian disclosure, to come on the Resistance website, www.resistance2010.com, and you'll see the post, the real reptilian and alien entity disclosure that Sevan had put together to get more information. So I want to say wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today on Esoteric Radio.